Welcome to 10 Talks, real conversations for champions with champions, where a champion life is a 10 life. Thank you for joining our conversation. I'm Carlette Patterson, and it's our desire to coach you up to win well-being by sharing winning strategies from our champion lives. If you're interested, go to championwellbeing.com or chiefwellbeingofficers.com. And remember, you and your life matter. Enjoy our conversation. Interested in winning well-being in your personal, professional, and philanthropic life? We've created a coaching and training program. It's called Champion Wellbeing. You can find out more information at championwellbeing.com. It's a combination of best practices from sports, business, and life. It's a curriculum that trains you in 10 intelligences. What are those 10 intelligences? Well, it's all about well-being, emotional intelligence, love, leadership, being you, economic independence, your identity, new for change management, and giving hope. Ready to win the day and win well-being? Go to championwellbeing.com. Hi team, welcome to 10 Talks. Today's discussion is all about stress. Now, I'm sure none of you are feeling any stress. I'm sure everything is going fabulous. I'm sure, you're just in a great space, even though it's been quite the interesting 2020. So what's great about today's conversation, our real conversation with our champion, Kathleen Matt, is she's going to talk to us about the good stress, the bad stress, the fabulous stress, the not so fabulous stress, whatever it is. We're going to come up with some winning strategies to set you up to be able to win well-being. So Kathy, welcome to 10 Talks, and thank you for sharing all of your winning strategies with us today as we really just embrace the truth of where we are right now and what's happening, and really get to know physiologically where stress happens in our body, what we do with it. It's going to be a fun conversation. Let's start first of all with the power of your story. Tell us about Kathleen Matt.
Well, Carlette, thank you so much for having me. And listeners, it's really nice to meet you virtually, as we are doing now in the world that we find ourselves in. But as we think about this a lot, we continue to think about, how do we find the silver lining? And I think it's the same with stress, right? There are both good and bad sides to stress. So I have always been very interested as an undergraduate, in particular, in understanding how organisms take in all of the information that they are bombarded with on a daily basis by everything in their environment. So I'm interested in what organisms actually, how they process all that information about the environment, and then how they then process that and line that up with their own physiology, so how their own body is working. And so I studied that as an undergrad at the University of Delaware, and then went on and did my PhD at University of Washington in Seattle. And my training is in the area of physiology, so understanding how the body works, but also in a very particular area of neuroendocrinology. So endocrinology is actually the study of hormones. And so you probably recognize testosterone and estrogen and progesterone and thyroid hormones. Cortisol is a stress hormone. So you've probably heard about many of those before. But those are chemical signals that travel around in the body, and they actually signal your body as to how to respond to the changes that are happening either in your environment or in your own physiology. After I finished my graduate work, went on and did a postdoc in Texas, in San Antonio, Texas, at a med school there, and then went on and had positions at a couple different medical schools, and was at Arizona State University in Phoenix, Arizona, or Tempe, Arizona, for quite a while, which is when I met Carlette Patterson. And we aligned because of her work in health coaching, but my work in really trying to translate what we know about the physiology and the science into applications that actually helps individuals to, in fact, live healthier lives, and actually is a way to really think about prevention and health promotion. And so then I was fortunate enough to be able to come back to University of Delaware, which I'm a grad of and mentioned at the beginning, to come back in as the Dean of the College of Health Sciences. And so it's really been my pleasure to serve as the Dean of a College of Health Sciences. We have nursing and physical therapy. And if you think about a health profession, they're in my college. And my goal has been really to take science, take the research, have that inform our teaching of the next generation of healthcare professionals. But at the same time, in the virtual surroundings that you see behind me, we created some new buildings on the site of an old automobile plant, the Chrysler plant in Newark, Delaware. And we have transformed that really into a health sciences campus. And actually, we now have a lot of other colleges within the university that are joining us there as well to do some interdisciplinary work. And again, one of the reasons that I'm so interested in working with Carlette, and one of the great pleasures in my life, as I said a little bit earlier, is this opportunity to really take what we learn in science and translate that into formulas and messages and all of that, so that in fact all of us can live a much healthier life. Along the way, I also did something which is called a congressional fellowship, which is very atypical for somebody in academics. And again, one of the reasons that I did that was to really understand how can science be a part of the decisions that we make. And of course, who would have dreamed that we would be right now as we are in the middle of a public health crisis, COVID, and also all of the issues around racism, which in fact is really just shining a light on the fact of that there are enormous health inequities. And so these are all things that we take very seriously and are working on within the college and within the state to really work towards finding solutions for these things.
So, Kathy, what's fabulous about just you and the work that you're doing is you said it as you really talked about just your journey. It's all about transformation. And small transformations, big transformations, kind of whatever a person really wants. And so when we talk about stress, sometimes there can be a feeling of no hope in terms of like, when I get stressed, I have to shut down, or, if I get stressed, I won't be able to do something. So from an anxiety perspective, everything is more about don't do it because I'm afraid of it. And how do we really turn that fear into fabulous, like an adventure? We can do this, give hope. So explain to us physiologically what's happening in our bodies so that we can understand it and have our body and stress work for us rather than really be against us.
Yeah, so great, great description, Carlette, and a great entree into a discussion about this. And as you were describing that, I was thinking about just think about the examples that we see in nature almost, right? So what happens when an animal is frightened? Okay, they typically, depending upon the animal, they will run, right? So fight, and that's the fight or flight response. So they run. You also see the exact opposite response sometimes, which is a freeze.
Right.
And you described both of those, Carlette. And so stress actually has two very important components that are a part of it, right? It can be, you can leverage it and create a positive experience. And I always think about athletes, or I think about individuals that find themselves in circumstances that are very challenging, but they rise to the moment. So you hear about something, a horrible car crash or something that happens to an individual, and somebody comes in and with strength much greater than they could imagine, they move the car or they move the tree so that they can, get the person out. And you sort of wonder, how are these amazing feats? And part of that is your body just responding to that emergency with all these changes in chemicals and hormones. So it's the adrenaline. You hear about that all the time, the adrenaline, the noradrenaline. And so there's that aspect of it. I think the negative consequences of stress, I usually think about something happening with cortisol.
Right.
And so cortisol is really again, if you stand in the grocery store line and you look at all the magazines, you'll say how to, little things about how to decrease your stress, how to get rid of high cortisol levels. And of course, cortisol is something that, again, can help you because it is what we call a glucocorticoid. It gives you glucose, and that actually could fuel the energy that you need when you are fight or flight, right? But at the same time, if cortisol is elevated for a long period of time, it's negative on your muscles, it's negative on your bones. It can result in high glucose levels, which then can result in diabetes. So it is what can be responsible for an expanding waistline. It also, again, if you are very stressed, what are the things that you're always looking for? You're probably looking for your phone. You're probably looking for your keys. Guess why you can't find them? Because cortisol is blocking that portion of your brain to affect your short-term memories. So there is always there are pluses and there are minuses. And so part of it is you can change your own physiology by how you perceive that stressor in many cases, not all cases, not in the disaster situation. But when you think about it, what do athletes do? Okay, they stand, if they're a swimmer, they stand on that starting block and they're all set to dive in. They really have to learn how to control that response in adrenaline. So what they want to do is hold off that increase in adrenaline until they hit the water and they're doing their sprint across, right, in a short. Now, if you're a marathon runner, the last thing you want to have done is to have that adrenaline go. You're never going to make it to the end of that marathon. And so that's actually another thing that we always have to gear into our thinking and processing. Is what I'm going through a short-term thing, or is what I'm going through a long-term thing that I have to prepare myself for? And so there again, Carlette is much better with all of the sport examples, but there are so many great sport examples. But it also translates in other aspects. So I can always remember, as an academic, we wind up giving a lot of talks, whether it's at a scientific meeting or a guest, come in as a guest lecturer or teaching. And I remember early on at the beginning when I was giving a lot of talks, and there was someone in science that I particularly enjoyed all of his presentations. And so we were all graduate students at the time. And I remember somebody saying to him, oh my gosh, you probably don't get nervous anymore. We all get so nervous. And he said, oh no, the sign that I am going to give a good talk is the fact that I do get nervous. Now, whether I call that nerves or not, but I feel those butterflies. I feel, and he said, I take that as excitement.
Yeah.
And that excitement then changes how I speak. And if I don't feel that, then I am very concerned about how that talk is going to be. And so I think it is also how you translate it in your brain as to whether you see that as sort of you're rising to the occasion, you are set and you are ready. And that's part of it. So.
Well, so Kathy, let's talk about really, that cortisol is very real. And as much as I might want to be super positive or, want to feel like I've got this and want to really redirect the adrenaline to the short term or the long term, what if I feel like I just can't do it in terms of I don't have it in me? I don't feel like I can do anything. Is it good to really push past those feelings so that you get the chemicals inside your body starting to produce, rather than just kind of stopping and acquiescing and giving into the cortisol?
Yeah. So in I think in the answer to this question, I would have to say, and I will qualify my remarks in a sense that I think the answer is that if you understand your physiology
Right.
and you can reflect on that, then you can help to move yourself out of that particular situation in most cases.
Right.
Sure, there are some exceptions to this. But I think if you think about and understand, as I said, the physiology, I think there are ways, and that, and that's kind of part of um, my attitude and my approach, which of course I would say is it's all about being proactive on these things. So, and so maybe if you will entertain this, then I'll explain a little bit more about the stress response, because I mentioned adrenaline and noradrenaline, and you can just feel that, right? Like if I made you stand up and give a talk right now, impromptu, about a topic that you don't know if you're going to know anything about, your heart would start racing and your breathing would, go at a faster pace, and you would probably feel that anxiousness, and but one of our problems is that when you feel anxious like that, and then let's say you're going to give a good talk tomorrow, you have to give a talk and you're worried about it all day and trying to work on this, and you can't really focus, and your mind's and then you go to sleep, you try to go to sleep at night, and you're still worried about this talk, so you don't sleep well. And so then what do? You wake up in the morning and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm too tired, I'm not awake. So what do? We take caffeine, right? So go get a Coke, go get a cup of coffee. And what that does is that increases all of the receptors for adrenaline and noradrenaline. So you will be even more sensitive to it. And furthermore, the other thing that we do is you eat sugar, right? So I always say it's not just by chance that when they show movies of police officers, that these police officers are actually in a donut shop drinking a cup of coffee and eating a donut. And what that does is that just perpetuates the stress response. Okay. And actually, the sugar in the donut will further change your neurotransmitters, a neurotransmitter called NPY, which will make your cortisol levels go up. And cortisol will make you eat not one donut, but probably two donuts and maybe even more. And I think it's this. And then what are the things that you feel when you feel stressed? Do you go for ice cream? Do you go for potato
Comfort
chips?
foods, right? Like let's that comfort food.
It's comfort food, but it's also salt and sugar,
Okay.
which further perpetuate the response. So what would help you more is to sort of realize that that is starting, and what would be a good adaptable solution. So when your heart's racing and you're sort of worried about all these things, go take a walk.
Mm.
Go take a walk. What happens when you take a walk? So you take a walk and you exercise and you increase that metabolic demand. That feedback then comes back and it turns off these loops. We also know that exercise is one of the most amazing benefits to mental health.
Mm.
Okay. So even the act of the exercise itself causes physiological changes. But in addition, be intentional when you go on that walk. So look at features in your environment, whether it's flowers, whether it's some grass, whether it's a design on a building. Appreciate it, look at it. It helps you to refocus your attention and appreciate your surroundings. And that all mitigates that stress response and helps a lot in a lot of ways. So, again, sort of opportunities that are always there is looking at your intake of caffeine, looking at your intake of water. Be sure that you're not dehydrated. Look at the kinds of foods that you eat rather than eating something really sugary that gives you a big increase in sugar in your blood and a big increase in insulin that then makes you hypoglycemic or super low in glucose. Eat something like a piece of fruit that has fiber in it, or whole wheat, something that, or protein, something that will give you sort of a sustained increase in glucose or something in your blood to actually give you the fuel that you need, but something that won't cause these exaggerated changes.
So, Kathy, as great as that sounds, you just pretty much said exactly what everybody does in terms of, get stressed out, they're going for it. So, coffee and caffeine can be a habit, a way of life. Sugar can be addictive. and
Right.
salt. So what do we do with those addictions? Like how, I mean, as good as that sounds, if I'm addicted to sugar or I'm addicted to caffeine, how do I manage that in a way that I am for my well-being and I'm for really managing my stress without compounding it?
Mhm. Well, so that I think we use the term addicted a lot. And again, in many cases it does absolutely fit. So we talk about sort of the challenges of drug addiction
Or I
and
could even be emotionally addicted, right? I
yeah,
mean, like it could be
right.
my go-to, my security. It could be what, feels right to me kind of thing.
Right, right, absolutely. So it could be all of those things as well. But I think also as individuals, if you understand, so this has always been my premise, if you understand what's happening
Right.
and you take a moment to sort of reflect on it and think about it, then you can at least make an attempt to break that cycle
Beautiful.
and so choose a different food. Now, having said that, there are also lots of schools of thought, and again, you have to sort of take each individual circumstance, But the other thing that can happen is that you don't get the satisfaction that you want.
Hmm.
So you really want a piece of chocolate, but you don't have any in the house, so you try all these other things and they
Right.
don't quite satisfy. So sometimes a small amount of something actually it is a way to sort of stop that particular craving. But again, when you're in the middle of a stress response, we tend to do things that continue to prolong the stress response. And then when we really say, okay, I really want to stop the stress response, then some of the other choices that we make as humans is we pick up a cigarette or we pick up a glass that has alcohol in it, whether that's wine or beer or, a nice cognac or bourbon or something like that. And again, maybe that's okay. And all of these things, and again, I should confess, I worked my way through college. And actually, part of my undergrad time and my graduate time was working in a bakery. So as a person, I love my sweets. I have a
And
pillow
you are
on
a
my.
fabulous baker, I must add, an
I
incredible cake decorator. So it's just very fun to bring in as we're talking about this. There's this way of life too. And really, how do you manage the things that you love while you still honor really
Yeah.
your well-being?
Yeah, but it's interesting. Try this sometimes because actually, one of the really famous chefs said this one time, and I heard her say it, and I thought, is that really true? But when you taste something, the first time you taste it, it's if it's done well, okay,
Right.
that taste is wonderful, right? You keep eating it, it's not the same experience
Hmm.
as the first bite. So there really is no reason to go for seconds because it doesn't have that same flavor as at the beginning. Because when you think about it, your taste buds adapt to it.
Right.
So
So
why,
let's
why
talk about the emotional side of that, Kathy, because am I wanting more because when I had that first bite, it was so good that I'm like, I want more of that good feeling.
yes, yes.
So what do
I,
I do with that?
yeah, so I think you're exactly right. Well, so I think it also comes back to thinking about what we're doing. It it
Mhm.
it requires it requires discipline, I think, to some extent. But I think the other thing is you can do replacement of things as well. So do the things that you really love. Okay.
Mm.
I mean, seriously, I love sweets. I love food. I mean, when I visited Austria, I had a pastry a day at least, right? They're amazing chefs, but I can eat small bites of that. I
Right.
can eat a small portion of it. But I think the other thing is, and you made a really, really good point. So you made an excellent point because if you think about it, the reason you keep eating it is exactly what you said. You want that same feel good feeling that you had at that very first mouthful of it, right? And so what you're really seeking is that wonderful feeling.
Yeah. The
So
emotion.
then I think you have to think about what are the other things that I really love and love to do? And what are those other pleasures that you maybe are missing because you just think comfort food or something like that? And again, everything in moderation is fine. The woman who ran this bakery, she would always say that. She would just say, everything in moderation. She ate a cupcake every single day. She wanted to check the batter and make sure everything that was being baked was good. And she was slim and smart and amazing. And so it really is just thinking about our choices, right? And thinking about who and what you want to be,
Mm.
and what matters the most to you. But I think sometimes there are days when just let it go.
Yeah.
Okay, tomorrow is a different day,
Right.
right? And so some days we are just entitled to just like do it, and you probably don't feel really great the next day, and
It's
then
called
you're,
being human, and it's also our truth, right? I mean, if you want
yes,
to go out and have a cheeseburger and fries and a shake, whatever, I hope you enjoy every single bite of it because,
exactly,
just embrace our humanness, embrace who we are, embrace that we need love, we need affection, we need emotionally, we want to feel good. I mean, the last thing I want is any part of this conversation or actually anything that we do and promote to be something that isn't real because we're all in a world that is full of stress right now and full of uncertainty and full of
yes,
change,
absolutely,
and we want to give hope from that perspective. And Kathy, one thing that I really value about what you said is that have the one bite, it's amazing, enjoy it, it's delicious. I also know physiologically that sometimes, for instance, with the potato chip, I can't just have one bite. So what's happening inside my mind and body when I can't resist and have that one bite?
yeah. So thanks for bringing that up because I always think, quite frankly, if you don't think about your physiology, then you give yourself a really hard time, because you say, "Oh, it's my inability to self-regulate." And I'm here to tell you that it's not all in your mind, that it is in your physiology, right? So there is a physiological reason why you cannot eat one potato chip. Okay, because probably, maybe, you reach for the potato chip because you're thinking, oh my God, I got to get this paper done by tomorrow morning, and there's just no way, and I'm starving. So I'm going to go down. Oh, found some potato chips. So you have a potato chip, and that salt just tastes really, really good, right?
My mouth
And
is watering just listening to this description. So yeah, I'm ready for a
no,
potato chip.
actually, where are my Lay's potato chips? Let me find. Oh, I shouldn't be advertising. But anyway,
Mm,
so you eat a potato chip, but what's happening in your physiology is that not only does that bring satisfaction, probably that salty taste again, and I think there are those of us who are more salt,
right.
more sugar, and a mixture, but actually salt and sugar are really strong cravings when you are in stress. And so then what happens is that causes an increase in a neurotransmitter in your brain, which is called NPY, which then causes an increase in cortisol. And cortisol's job is to actually drive up your sugar and your glucose levels in your blood, right? So that is going to make your appetite even more, and it's going to drive you to eat even more potato chips. And so what that does is that creates a positive feedback loop. So the more you eat, the more you want to eat, and it keeps on going. And the only way to break the cycle is you finish the bag. Or you just say, okay, enough is enough, tie up the bag, and then I don't know, go get a piece of apple or go for a walk or sort of change the venue that you're in, and do something different because you sort of realize where you are. Drink some water, all those kinds of things. But again, we all have those days. But I think if you recognize it,
Right.
and again realize, I mean, I used to teach a course with with some psychologists as well as myself with as the physiology piece, and it was about stress. It's in your mind and it's in your physiology, and so they reinforce each other. I mean, I've also done some work on post-traumatic stress disorder and looking at the hormone profiles of individuals that have extreme depression, and again you see a resulting change in the hormones. So you're dealing with all of those. I think that the piece that makes me hopeful and optimistic, and the piece that I really enjoy, is it does say that with your brain you are able, with your thoughts and what you're doing, that you can actually sort of change some of that translation. Now this is assuming that there is not any underlying
Right.
medical condition, and certainly there can be medical conditions that actually cause this. If you're diabetic and you're undiagnosed, you may see an increased craving for sugary foods, because your body is not getting the glucose that it needs because you don't have the insulin. And so, in that particular case, what you see is individuals who are really eating a lot of sugar, but at the same time are losing weight because they don't have that insulin. And there's a lot of other things that you would see in those scenarios. But again, I think it is also increasing our repertoire of things that make us feel good,
Yeah.
because maybe that's at the essence of some of it. It's not all about stress, but again, even sometimes, something, maybe it's not stress, maybe you just had a really tough day and things did not go your way. And so you're looking, and I think this kind of goes back to your example, Carlette. You're kind of looking for something that is that comfort. And
You want to
so,
feel good, right? Like, I mean, if you've
yeah,
had a really tough day and you've been out there battling and, things aren't going well, or you feel lonely or sad, or you just, want something that feels good. And sometimes eating feels good when it's happening. And then there's that
yeah,
shame or guilt or, so it is a very vicious cycle from an emotional perspective versus food being something that's really nurturing us and us physiologically
right.
understanding what it is we're doing.
So what I would also suggest is that people also, I mean, think about other things that make you feel
Right.
warm and cozy and loved. And so, is that talking to a best friend that you have? Is that sending a text message to them, or sending them an email, or calling them on the phone? Or is it something that you love to do? Whether that is, painting or creating something. What are those other things that you really enjoy doing, that you can't always do? So here's another aspect, right, that can bring you maybe that calm or comfort that you're looking for. And those are our wonderful pets.
Yeah.
I've heard so many people tell me that without their dog or their cat, they never would be getting through this pandemic. They're wonderful. They know, somehow they have a sixth sense about how you feel and what you're feeling. And they've all become Zoom animals, right? They kind of lay at your feet for the next time your Zoom meeting is going to be over, and boom, they're going to catch you as you leave. So again, think, kind of just expand your resources of things that that you love to do, that make you feel good, and maybe make a list of them, so the next time that you need something like that, it'll trigger your memory of what makes you feel really
So let's talk about high performance in terms of we're launching our Chief Wellbeing Officer program. We've got Champion Wellbeing. We're really committed to taking everything that we've learned in our 30 years of sports, and you've certainly got that from an academic perspective. We're combining sports, business, and life and saying, how do we bring all of these best practices together for well-being to win well-being in our world, personally, professionally, philanthropically. So, and thank you for being a part of our team as we start to really conquer that and say, let's find the knowledge. Let's be able to share the knowledge. Let's come up with winning strategies. Let's be honest about performance barriers. What barriers are getting in the way of well-being, and what are some actions to change? Really making sure that we're anchored in truth. The truth is, it's a very stressful time. Food is fabulous. We have habits for it. We eat too much. We exercise too little. Whatever our truth is, let's start there and then really begin to determine what's our desired outcome. Do I want to be physically fit? Do I want to be able to perform longer at work? Do I feel like my energy dips? Like, everybody has their own definition of well-being, and we are for that. We are for people gathering the information and really figuring this out. So the work that we've been blessed to do is really with high achievers and high performance. How do we perform in sport? How do we perform in business? So how do we take really well-being into correlating it with performance?
So there's a lot of things to incorporate together. There's a lot to unpack in what you just said. Because as you were speaking about that, I was just thinking about many times individuals who are the highest performers at work. And again, it would depend what your work is.
Yeah.
But they're usually very, very busy people.
Right.
And sometimes, to my surprise, in part of my life, I was in a exercise and sport research institute, and so a lot of athletes would come in to train. And actually, now having a physical therapy unit that is within my college, we have lots of athletes who come in with their injuries. And I have to confess that I always thought that athletes were like the prime example of being in top shape, but it's not really, right? Not all athletes are in top shape because they also get into this cycle of just more is better. And if I'm not performing at my highest level, I have to train more. And so we always had to sort of look at that. I mean, we've done a lot of studies on overtraining. So and I say that because I think no matter who you are and no matter where you are on the scale of performance, and I think, Carlette, this is sort of who you are and always emphasizing, we want to be our best selves and we want to be at the top of our game. And even if we're at our top of our game at one point, but we're really not thinking about our health and well being, then there are no guarantees. And probably it's a pretty good guarantee that you're not going to stay at the top of your game for very long. So I had even done some research with Army Rangers and Special Forces. And that was actually one of the reasons they wanted to look into this, is because they did a lot of things in training to make these individuals top performers. But then how do you sustain them?
Right.
So,
or even continue to get better, right? I mean, how can we continue to get better and better and better
and
rather than peak?
so I think all of us, no matter where you are on this continuum, you have to look at what you do in a day. And you have to prioritize. This is for all of us, right? What you do in that day. And I think the other thing you have to realize, because sometimes people feel selfish if they set time aside, either for exercise or for cooking really nutritious food, because of course we know that the food that you take in, the closer it is to sort of its native state, that's going to be more packed with nutrients and minerals and all of that than the processed foods that you get, right? So, but that takes a little bit more work to actually do that than just to grab something off the shelf that's already processed, right? But is that worth it? Probably it is. What are are you taking vitamins? Are you taking minerals? What are all those things? Hydration, all those important things. But those have to be top priorities so that you can stay at the top. And sleep. Sleep is absolutely important. And the quality of that sleep is really important. So having a routine, I think, and again, I'll get my quotes wrong from you, but it's like routines and rituals and all of that is really important. And okay, maybe you haven't had to do it up to this point, but everybody reaches a point where, and this is usually what would happen to me with athletes, they would only come into me when their game was not as good,
Right.
when they had tipped that curve and they wanted to get back up again. And that's when we found out they were like overtraining, not taking in enough nutrients to balance their energy demands. So it really is important for all of us to really look at who you are, how you spend your time each day, and sort of incorporate these things. So rest and relaxation, refueling, rejuvenation, in addition to, exercising and all of those things at the same time, and taking time for yourself. I think the other thing that we sometimes do when we're super busy is we take away the things that actually could really help us.
Hmm. Like what?
So, and again, it kind of depends on where you are on these things, but okay, so it used to be when you had more time on your hands that you would go and visit that friend who was sick or had a birthday, but now you don't have time. So you send them an email and say, happy birthday, right?
Right.
Okay. But, or, you might go out to the store and buy them a present, or you might make them something. You might bake them something, right? And they live not very far away. So you would actually walk to their house, but now we won't, right? And so when you think about it, we've really categorized our lives in a way that we can get more done, but we get less of those sort of complementary things. Because I always think about my mom. I mean, she was in her 80s, but we had a basement, a first floor, and a second floor in our small house. But she went up and down the stairs all the time. She was out taking care of the garden. She was doing her laundry, hanging it outside, blah, blah, blah. Exercise was built into every aspect of her day.
Right.
But we are so successful and technologically, we have so much. So a lot of things we did manually before, now you got a machine to do it. So we've actually built a lot of these things out of our life. We have to build them back in because those are also the things that make you feel better at the same time.
So, Kathy, part of our well-being is all about winning the day. And so that's if we can win each day, and certainly just like in sports, we're going to win some and lose some. We've talked about maybe losing a day when we're just really stressed. And instead of, just honor that, right? Just, I mean, for me, curl up, watch some Netflix, pop some popcorn, have a glass of wine. I mean, whatever it
Exactly.
is, I'm going to be
I'm
like,
there. I'm
yeah,
there.
like today is not a 10 for me. Thank you very much. And instead of like forcing myself to make it a 10, I'm just
Yes.
going to call it a day. I'm going to admit that I didn't win that day.
Yeah.
So as you talk about really designing an ideal day,
That sounds like a 10-day to me.
yeah, that's true.
It's a different kind of a 10-day, right?
Because I honored myself, or what are you thinking? Yeah.
Well, because you honored yourself, because again, you hear that whole description. I think you would be in a good place to go to bed that night and get a good sleep, right?
So,
After doing that, and you honored yourself. It's a different kind of 10.
yeah. So let's talk about how to win the day so that we can, leave this conversation and feel like I have hope that, okay, great. I know how to really become a champion for my well-being. And it's not a pill that we can take. It's not like some boot camp that we're going on. I mean, yes, that could be all of it, but we're talking about a lifestyle, really falling in love with you and your lifestyle. Who are your friends? Who are your family? How are you connecting to your community? What's
Right.
happening with the food that you're eating, with the conversations that you're having inside your head and outside in your environment? Who are
Right.
you hanging around with? Are they for you?
Mhm.
What's happening from that perspective? So, as much as we talk about the physiological side and also just the power of stress and our choices, let's talk about an ideal day, winning the day. Take us through a ritual and routine of what's it like, wake up in the morning, how much sleep, what are we eating? Just tell us those winning strategies.
Mm. challenging because it depends upon the day. And so I don't even know that I want to use myself as an example. Um,
You can just tell us the components of
yeah,
a winning day, right?
no,
I mean,
no,
just really the
no,
things that each person can look at.
yeah, no, I think it's really important. But even as I think about how you do your day, to me, what matters is also what you did. You can't just start the day. You have to do it the night before.
Perfect. Let's start the
So,
night before. Great.
yeah. So I always set up my next day by thinking about it the night before. So again, we're all in different lives, but I print out my schedule for the next day. So I actually very carefully look at those meetings that I'm going to do. And again, this would fit for anybody. You got to go take your kids to school, you got to go to practice, you need this, you need that, or you're just going to go take care of a loved one or an aunt or something. So what's in your day tomorrow? And what do you want to think about? And what do you need to get ready
Right.
for the night before? And then that also affects when you, again, I think one of the keys to all of this and the key to life actually is to be intentional.
Hmm.
Okay. So intentional, probably some people would use purposeful, but it really is to have a clear intention. So, clear intention, you want to have a great day tomorrow, you want to be successful at what you're doing. So, take a look at what your day is going to be like and what are the things that you need to set up to really feel good. When do you need to go to bed? If it's going to be a tough day tomorrow and you got to get up super early because your first things that you're committed to are early in that day, then you got to get to bed early. Okay. Which means that you should have sort of a winding down routine. Okay. Routines are always good. They cue your body as to what's going to happen. Right. And so brushing teeth, all those kinds of things, whatever you need to do to get ready for bed. And maybe it's reading a book, maybe it's something else that just takes your mind off of whatever that day was so that you get a good sleep. Um, and then it's also about temperature in your room and all those kinds of things. What feels the best to you? Again, you're trying to cool down your body, and again, sort of get a good night's sleep. And then, what do you need to do about your alarms in the morning, or do you not need an alarm? Are there multiple ones? What time? And make sure that you give yourself enough time so
Hmm.
that you're not rushing around. Because again, that's going to invoke a stress response. You're going to forget your keys or your notebook or whatever you needed. So give yourself enough time. Okay. So you set your alarms or maybe not, go to bed, get up the next morning. Okay. And again, maybe the next morning you have that same ritual. Okay. But I always decide the night before, okay, I got to take my dog for a walk. This means I got to get up at this time, right? And I'm going to get that done. Got my coffee made. I got my breakfast bar. I got all that figured out. Picking out your clothes, that's a whole other conversation. Okay. Some people do it the night before, some people do it the day of. So it matches your mood. It depends how important my meetings are or what my event is. If it's very specific and I have to pick out clothes for it, I do. And then again, I'm not always the best about this, but thinking about what that day is going to be like in terms of lunch and dinner and thinking about those various food stops. Because if you go all day long and you don't eat, you come home, you're absolutely ravenous. Whatever you pull out of the cabinets is what you're going to eat. And that's a whole other conversation about how you set up the cabinets and the refrigerator in your house, put all the good food in the front, get rid of all the junk. Okay. I don't have ice cream in my freezer. I eat ice cream, but I don't have it in my freezer. So I can go out and just get a little bit that I want. But again, there's sort of all kinds of things for that. But I also think it's also the mindset for that
Hmm.
whole day and being proactive about that day. So coming into every meeting or every aspect that you do of your day, whether it's visiting somebody, talking to somebody, it's really how can you be your best self and be genuine and be proactive about what happens. And also, I think it's about trying to be aware and responsive to everything around you, whether that's people, whether that's children, whether it's animals. all those kinds of things. And again, you can sort of gear your physiology based on all of this. Make sure you have something for breakfast, right?
Kathy, is there something in particular for breakfast that really fuels our body to set us up for a successful day, or is that different for every person?
Well, to some extent, it's different for every person. And again, we always say this to athletes. A lot of times, athletes pick their very thing that works for them. But again, you don't want to go in the cabinet and get out some sugary frosted cereal. I mean, that's going to give you a huge spike in glucose and insulin, and then you'll be hypoglycemic by the time you get to your first event or meeting or talk with somebody. So you really want to have something that has protein, a little bit of fat, probably a little bit of sugar and that. But again, the protein and the fat is going to stay with you longer during that day. Um, and then again, I think another thing that you should incorporate into every day is exercise. And for some people, it's doing it first thing in the morning, okay? Because by the end of the day, you're really, really tired. And so it's just not going to happen. Other people, they love to, on their drive home, I'm going to stop at the Y. I'm going to go do an exercise class, going to do a spin class, get really geared up, and, and then my whole day is changed, right, by doing that. So but a lot of people, for again, sort of the same group, there's a group that does exercise at night, there's another group that does it in the morning. You go, you do it, you come home, you take a shower, you're all good and ready to go, and you get to the office and you've already had a fantastic day. Yeah. I mean, I remember as a mom, I used to always think it was amazing. By the time I got to work, I had already gotten up, made my daughters their lunch, cut out their sandwiches in the shape of a heart, put all their favorites in their lunchbox. I get to school. Here are other people kind of walking up to the coffee pot. They're just waking up. And I'm thinking, my day's half over, in a sense about
it's 8 o'clock and you're ready for lunch.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, but exercise is absolutely important. Thinking about the kinds of food that you're going to eat that day. Another thing that I actually do now, and again, I think when you're super busy or even in our current situation, be sure that you have snacks with you. I mean, I use energy bars a lot, but again, be really careful about their content. A lot of them have a lot of sugar in them. So you want to make sure they have protein, that they're really balanced. And I don't think I should name any labels, but again, I think you should look at those carefully, but make sure you have those, because then you're not going to stop in some little store and, try to just grab some junk because, you're not eating. Cheese, fruit, nuts. Nuts are absolutely fantastic. They have lots of minerals, lots of protein in them. They're extremely good for you. So again, sort of think about having those snacks with you. And then if you're eating, again, there's different schools of thought on this, but, people usually say 3 to 5 meals a day. If you're not eating during the day and then you come home at night, you've had a stressful day, have a glass of wine, have a big dinner, then you keep munching all night long, your body is shutting down. Okay, so you're missing the whole cycle of metabolism. The reason that you need to have a good breakfast is to kick off your metabolism, and then that metabolism gives you the energy that you really need to get through your day. And then your lunchtime and snacks in between and all of that. I mean, we have to make our vending machines much better about the kinds of food they have in them, or you need to bring it with you. Make sure you drink lots of good water during the day and stay hydrated. Actually, we used to have a little game in the office. For every time I was carrying around my coffee, they were like, "Where's your glass of water?" Right. So,
Kathy, you bring up something that most people love, and that's coffee or caffeine. How do you really balance that? What's the winning strategy for coffee and how it can really be for you rather than working against you?
Well, so again, it's increasing receptors for adrenaline and noradrenaline. So if you find yourself and you realize that you are sort of having an exaggerated response. So what I mean by that is something happens and your heart is racing really fast and you feel like you're getting much more anxious and much more upset than you normally do. Okay. And barring any kind of medical problem.
Right.
To me, uh, can be a sign that you're drinking too much coffee,
Okay.
right? But one of the other things, which is a little counterintuitive, is if you feel like you're drinking a lot. So if you are feeling more and more tired all the time, and when you think about your day, you're thinking, well, geez, I had lots of coffee today. I don't know why I am so tired. To me, that is a key that I need to cut back on my coffee.
Hmm.
Because when you are still craving more and more and you're feeling more and more tired, then those two don't go together, right? There's a disconnect. And probably part of that reason is you are also not getting good quality sleep, right? Because you're drinking so much caffeine. So to me, that's the hint that you got to go back. You got to go backwards, right? So only one cup of coffee. And it's surprising because once you go on like that caffeine detox, and again, it usually doesn't take very long, then you can go back to one coffee and it's really powerful.
So what about when we're going out to eat? Sometimes that's when kind of everything just goes to heck in terms of we have good rituals and routines and we really have this structure at home, and then we go out to eat and we don't know what to order, or we order too much of something. What are some winning strategies when we go out to eat?
So I think it goes back to this idea that we talked about a little bit earlier. And again, there are different schools of thought on this. So again, I would just say this is sort of my thinking on this. So it's about the amount
Right. Okay.
that you eat
Yeah.
more than anything else. And so it's pretty, and I think another good thing that has really an American, well, so there's a couple things. I think it's really good that now in a lot of restaurants, not all, but in a lot of restaurants, they do put the calorie count in there. And if they don't put it in there, you can get one of these books or look it up online and it'll tell you exactly how many thousands of calories that are in there, right? But at the same time, going back to physiology, by having the fat in it, by having those high quality food products in there, that brings about a certain change in the chemicals, which again is really what part of what brings about satiety. So this is one of the things that really didn't work about people designing all of these non-fat foods, right? So there's no fat in it, but there's tons and tons of sugar. But people were like, oh, there's no fat in it, right? But there's tons of sugar. So there's tons of calories. But then at the same time, you're not feeling satisfied because
Right.
the fat isn't there. And so then you're eating more and more of it. So again, I mean, I err on the side of high quality, but a small amount of food. So you take it home and you take a doggy bag and you have it for tomorrow night. So it's all about the quantity. And again, I think, there's a lot of ways. One of the things too is you can decrease your calorie intake by 100 calories a day, just from normal, and you'll lose 10 pounds in a year. The sad part is increase it by 100 and you gain 10 pounds in a year. That's where that 10 pounds came from. But there are simple things that you can do. I mean, I love food, but there are simple things you can do. Like you don't have to put butter on your bread, or not all the time, right? And you don't need dressing on your salad, maybe, or get it on the side and put a little bit on. You think you're doing great to have a salad. Look at the number of calories in the dressing. So there are little things like that it doesn't even feel like you're depriving yourself. You're just being smart about it. So it's just those kind of little tricks of the trade.
So, Kathy, this has been a wealth of information. Love, love, love. First of all, just your passion for serving and supporting people and sharing your knowledge. And team, I hope that you have enjoyed and picked up so many of these winning strategies. When I listen, I hear all of our tools about stats on a scale of 1 to 10. Make sure that everything you're doing when you're investing your time, your energy, your emotions, personally, professionally, philanthropically, it's in that 8, 9, or 10 zone. Like it matters to you. The
Yeah.
food that you're eating is really, an 8, 9, or 10 for you. The people you're hanging out with, the way you're spending your time. And if it's not, how can you take control to really raise your stats? Figure out, like, take it on as an adventure or take it on as a challenge, whatever language you need to really set you up for yourself, really you going for designing this life that's a 10 for you, figuring out the food, figuring out exercise, figuring out sleep. We want you to be able to win the day and, most importantly, be a champion for your well-being. And you're unique. Each one of us, we have this own machine that is really special and unique. And enjoy the adventure of figuring out what works for you, what doesn't work for you. Talk to experts, find your support team. Try it. That's the best part. Have a tryout for this. Go for as many exercises as you can. Stat them up. I went hiking. What was my stat? It was a 7. How would I make it an 8? Well, I want to go with a friend, so it's a lot more interesting. Okay, I need to go for a walk. Maybe I could get an animal or walk my dog, or something that's always challenging you to figure out, how can I design a life that I'll want to get up every day and I'll want to live this ritual and routine instead of forcing myself to, or making it to where I have to, or I'm cutting out all the things that I love. We'll never sustain that. And,
Mhm.
life's about really this journey of joy. And that's what brings us so many moments of well-being, and those moment by moments really turn into a life of well-being. So thank you, Kathy. Thank you for sharing your time with us. Any words of wisdom that you want to leave our team with?
Well, I just so enjoyed just what you just said and listening to that. And I think it really is about being intentional and, again, in everything that you do, making the quality the best that it can be and enjoying and loving what you do. And I think, and being grateful
Mm.
for what we all have. So thank you very much for having me, and congratulations to you on all that you are doing, and your work in health and well-being and health coaching and life coaching is so important. And I think it really brings us back to the things that are important in our life. And then from that, we really can be the best, our best selves.
Well, Kathy, thank you. I know we've been together about 20 years in terms of this journey of really supporting each other and just being side by side in terms of how can we help people really figure out how to be their best. And very excited to bring you into our next venture about chief wellbeing officers and champion wellbeing. So team, you are set up to really go out and win the day and be a champion for your wellbeing. And you can go to our websites, championwellbeing.com or chiefwellbeingofficers.com, and find out more information. And Kathy and I will be here supporting you along with the rest of our team. So go out, win the day, make it a champion day, and to be continued on your well-being. Thank you for listening. We'd like to get you coached up, so head over to iTunes and Spotify and hit subscribe. And remember, a champion life is a 10 life. You and your life matter. Create a life that you love, give hope to others, and be and choose nothing but 10s. Be you. The world needs you. Go to lifetrainingacademy.com to start your training and get coached.